Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican. I'm your host, Inez Russell Gomez, and this week we are talking basketball. New Mexico high school basketball, to be specific. With us is New Mexican sports writer James Barron, who has spent many, many nights in sweaty gyms watching kids throw the ball around.
Yes, too many nights, Inez. Too many nights.
That's why you're aging rapidly, I think.
So people would say gracefully.
Gracefully.
That's what Chris tells me, but I don't quite believe her.
No, she's right. I'm just teasing you. Welcome, James. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I always enjoy talking basketball.
Why do you think New Mexico, which I always joke is we're high altitude but height challenged, because a lot of us are very short.
Yes.
Present company not included, because our producer Matt is quite tall.
Well, but he's also from Iowa, so he doesn't count.
That's true. That's true. But why do we like basketball so much?
Boy, that is a great question, and it's something that I guess over time you kind of learn. And I got to think really it's, at least in northern New Mexico, I think it becomes a community event, especially when you consider, even Santa Fe to a certain degree has still kind of that small town feel, even though it's, about 80, 90,000 now, I think, in terms of population. But basketball was something, especially during the wintertime, that the community would go and those types of events, and that's what they would kind of congregate toward. And they became big events. And then as you saw some of the successes that you've seen, I think probably you start in the 50s and 60s. Obviously, I think here in Santa Fe, the St. Michael's teams, the Mighty Midgets, and the success that Dick Shelley had back in the mid to late 60s. I think you also look at just some of the smaller communities, Pecos, Mora, Peñasco, Mesa Vista. For a lot of people, I mean, that's kind of what their towns really kind of center on is basketball, and they have such a great passion for it. And it was interesting. I think probably my second or third year here at the New Mexican, I was talking to somebody, and they were mentioning how there was an assistant coach from a Division I program, and what he marveled about was how fundamentally sound the players were here. He said it's probably some of the best basketball you could see under 6 feet. And, talking about just the lack of height. Around here, being a 6-footer means you're a post player. You go to other places, Colorado, Texas, even Arizona, or the surrounding border states. A 6-footer is a guard. But here, because, again, like you said, the lack of height, if you're 6-footer above, you're a big guy around here. And I think also the speed of the game, too, because you have shorter players. And the style of basketball that they play here, a lot of teams want to play up tempo. They want to press. They want to run. It was routine, back in the day when you saw games in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's not quite like that now. The game's kind of evolved even up north here. But I think that's what kind of caught the attention of a lot of people here, and that's kind of where it evolved from, and why it continues to be such a backbone of every community up here up north.
What I remember as a little girl is that the Stu Clark tournament, which they usually held in the Highlands gym, but it was hosted by either West or East or somebody in Las Vegas. I don't even know. I was a kid. And I just remember what a big deal it was, because it was winter break, but you got to go and see everybody you knew. And if you were lucky, the Dons would make it all the way to the finals, and we would all be happy. And it was just like like you said, it was a huge community event.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case with that tournament for sure. I think the best small school basketball tournament in the state is the Northern Rio Grande tournament, and it's moved around. And it's one where they have had it at Espanola. They've even had it at Santa Fe High School for a while, in Pewaukee. But all these communities, they bring hundreds, thousands of people there to a neutral site, and they're there from morning till night. The semifinals of this past year's tournament, the third place game, actually not the semifinals, the third place game, the final day, there were about 3,000 people there for a third place game between Pecos and Peñasco girls. The only reason why that was happening is because Pecos and Mora boys were playing right after it. But that kind of shows you just how big it is still here when you can get 3,000 people in a gym like Edward Medina in Espanola, and that's a small crowd. That's a gym that can hold about 5,000 people. But you just see the passion still there, especially at the smaller school levels and with these tournaments. And then you get some really high quality teams there too. You look at the Stu Clark tournament, and you've got teams like Pecos, St. Michael's. Obviously, the Vegas schools are very good. You get Portales and Bernalillo, who have been staples of that tournament for almost at least 2 decades. but they bring in quality teams and great competition, and people just really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's an entertainment for people. Maybe back when I was little, we didn't have any more than 3 channels, so there was a lot of reason to leave the house. The other thing I think about is, I mean, obviously we like football in New Mexico as well, but I think size is even more of a problem on a football team, and it's also you need, a bunch of players to make a football team, but you can have a basketball team with, 5 guys, 5 girls, and a few substitutes. So I think because we have so many small schools, isn't that a reason perhaps that people focus more on basketball?
Yeah, definitely. I'll give an example here. Mora, I think back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, they tried to start a football program, and they had some young kids that were coming up through the YAFL program. A lot of those kids came through the Vegas program that they had there, the Vegas YAFL program, and they tried to set that up, and they never could get it stabilized or get it to where they could consistently have 25, 30 kids coming out. But I think like you said, with basketball, it's so much easier. Again, all you need is a hoop, a gym, and at least 5 people. And in a lot of cases in these small towns, usually you get 40, 50, 60 kids. Santa Fe High even, talking to Cisco Rivera, the boys coach there, this past year, they had 60 players that tried out for basically what amounted to about 42 spots. So you have 18 kids that you're going to have to cut because you just don't have enough space for them. So I think that just shows you just how much interest there is still in basketball, even today, compared to even some other sports. Just as an example, I mean, St. Michael's, they won the state championship this year in Class 3A. Normally, they have about 40, 45, 50 kids. They had 37 players on their team. That was the smallest team they've had probably in decades, and yet they were still able to win the state championship. But I think it just kind of shows you that with football, interest can kind of ebb and flow, but with basketball, it just seems to be a constant.
I remember when my son was in elementary school, he had a cousin who was really tall, and he played for Gonzales. And because he was at the tournament, we all went to support, our cousin. And I could not believe, you have an elementary basketball tournament, and St. Mike's was full, and there were people standing out in the hallways, and everyone thought it was going to be it was a battle because there was that tall kid that went to Nava that was really like 15 and ended up going to St. Mike's but not lasting long for some reason. And it was an incredible fight.
Yeah, but I think that just shows you where it begins. It starts at the elementary school levels and it keeps going up. I mean, one example I'll give here real quick is Espanola. They've developed an elementary school program, a feeder program essentially. And when you think, all those kids are going to go to, you think that they would ideally go to Espanola Valley, but a lot of those kids don't. And so what happens is that this one school system feeds into Mesa Vista, Penasco, Pewaukee, Los Alamos, even Taos, and sometimes down into Albuquerque. And that's just one small town with hundreds of kids that still end up playing basketball when they get to the high school level.
Wow. On that note, we will take a break, and we'll be back in a moment with more Conversations Different and James Barron.
Thanks, Inez. This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez. Great local content is only possible with a talented staff dedicated to bringing you the best local content possible. For that staff to do its work, we need your support by subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. And if not, there's never been a better time to subscribe. In addition to our home-delivered newspaper that comes with full digital access, we also provide digital-only subscriptions for SantaFeNewMexican.com. We'll also be releasing more online-only audio and video programming moving forward. The Santa Fe New Mexican has been here for nearly 175 years, and we want to continue being your source for local news and information. Visit us at SantaFeNewMexican.com/subscribe or call us at 505-986-3010. Thank you.
It's a new day in New Mexico, and the doors to boundless opportunity are open as tens of thousands of New Mexicans reach higher to pursue a dream, broaden their horizons, and retrain for a better job. With the New Mexico Lottery and Opportunity Scholarships, you could build yourself a better future anywhere in the state. You put in the hard work, we'll help with the costs. For eligibility details, visit reachhighernm.com.
are back with Conversations Different, talking to James Barron, who has spent many of his years covering high school basketball in New Mexico. One of the things I was thinking about on break, and we were talking about, is just how important basketball can be out in the reservation. Because again, you need a ball, you need a hoop. So you're out in Navajo land, and every house you drive by, there is going to be a hoop.
Yeah, some sort of hoop. I mean, some of them I've seen them where they make them out of basketball crates and everything, and you just take the bottom out and everything, and you use that as your hoop. I mean, and especially even in this region here, I mean, you have the pueblos up north around Pojoaque, Tesuque, in the Espanola area, San Juan. I was going to say Okiawenge, but I think
no, that is San Juan.
That is in that area there. So, but. There's a great passion there, and I think you definitely see it. You see a lot of those kids go to the Santa Fe Indian School, and again, we talk about how these become community events. You see a lot of people from those areas, from those pueblos, that come down to watch the boys and the girls there. But it also goes to Pojoaque and Los Alamos and Espanola, because some of the native kids go to those schools as well, and those people will show up to those events. What also fascinates me too is, and maybe it's people my generation or even a little bit older, but you see a lot of people that just they don't have any particular interest in a particular team. You just see people that just go to basketball games because that's how much they love it, and that's how much they're interested in it, that they'll just go to a variety of different games. So I see a lot of people where I'm like, I see them at a St. Mike's game one day, and then they're at Santa Fe High the next, or they're at Indian School the following day, and it almost kind of becomes kind of a fraternity in a lot of ways. Not to take it away from what we're talking about here with the natives, but I think it's just part of that collective there where people just really, their passion really is centered around basketball.
Yeah, I know that girls' teams can be really followed as well.
Yes.
I remember once years ago when my then boyfriend, later husband, was working in Shiprock. I would go see him on the weekends. And one Friday morning, I was leaving really early, and I'm driving, and there's just like this incredible line of cars. And I had no clue there was a state basketball tournament that weekend. But evidently, Shiprock and Kirtland were both playing, and everybody in those towns was gone.
Yeah.
And it was literally like almost miles of cars. And I got there, and I said, what the heck happened? And it was like, it's a basketball game.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I think just to kind of correlate it here for people up in northern New Mexico, the best thing and the worst thing that can happen for a northern school is to have, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, one of those red schools come to your town for a basketball game. Because on the plus side, the stands are going to be full. But on the downside, it means you better get your butt there early, or else you're not going to get in there. I remember a game about 7 or 8 years ago at Santa Fe Prep, and I believe I want to say it was either Tehachapi or Through. I forget which one of the Northwest schools it was. They came down there. I got there probably about 4:45. And they were already starting to turn people away, and there were still people coming in. And now, for those that don't know, Santa Fe Prep probably has about 500 seats. So I'm going to guess they probably turned away, I'm going to say at least a couple hundred people there. But another example was about 2 or 3 years ago, Santa Fe Indian School goes down to Sandia Prep to play them in the 3A quarterfinals. And they literally took over the gym. There was no space left in that gym. They were all Indian School fans. There was probably about maybe 100, maybe even less, maybe even fewer Sandia Prep fans there. And it was a great game. I mean, Santa Fe Indian School ended up pulling out the win. It was a big upset. They got to the semifinals that year. But I think it just kind of shows you just, how basketball crazed those communities are.
No, it does. I know in college basketball, not to brag about my Red Raiders, which sadly lost a little bit last week, but they're still ranked in the top 25. But one of the funnest things to do is to go play Dallas or Austin schools and then take over the court. Mm-hmm. And everyone is very proud when we can hear Raider Power on television. And I'm sure that if you're at Sandia Prep and you've got all Indian School fans or all through fans or whoever's there, you're going to be really happy.
Yeah, well, I've talked to kids about it, and it kind of depends on how, in a lot of ways, how you're wired. Some kids, they love it. They love playing in that type of atmosphere because that's what every kid dreams of. But then you've got other kids that maybe aren't as basketball savvy or maybe just new to the sport, and they see 1,000 kids there and everybody's screaming and yelling and they're all screaming against you, and they kind of tighten up and they get a little nervous and maybe they make mistakes, and then the other team kind of takes advantage of it. And in the example that I just gave with Sandia Prep and Santa Fe Indian School, that's exactly what happened. You had a couple of kids for Sandia Prep that played really well because they knew how to handle that type of pressure, but the other kids just freaked out and it kept Indian School in the game, and that was a game that even went overtime too on top of all that. But it's when you talk to kids afterwards, they get that kind of that wide-eyed look, and it's like,
your home court's supposed to be your home court.
Yeah, it is. But even when it's not your home, it ends up not being your home court. A lot of those kids are like, I've never seen anything like it, and they're amazed by it. I mean, you can just tell just by the look in their eyes. They may not say that they were amazed by it, but you can just see they're just they kind of got that glossed over look, like, I can't believe I just played in this.
No, I'm so old that when I played basketball, we actually had 3-person. We didn't cross the middle line.
Oh, that's right.
Because
yes.
girls, we were delicate. We couldn't run that fast. And I remember a middle school game that was our worst rival. And it was so awful. They actually had police escort us in and out. And we won it because I was friends with a lady who was on an actual state championship basketball team in Texas, and she showed me how to pull fouls as a defender and to get offensive fouls.
Oh, wow.
So I pulled a foul, and then this genius girl, Sandra Branham, I still remember her name, made 2 points, and we won by 1 point. And literally, we had to be, because we were visitors, and we had to be escorted away because the Matthews crowd was so angry. And there's something about being in that bubble where everyone's excited, it's hot, you're sweating, even if you're not playing.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the other reasons basketball is so popular is the adrenaline. There's not another sport that matches it. I think because soccer's outside, football's outside.
Yeah.
It's that being cooped up.
I think the only way you could compare those two sports is when you have, maybe a few thousand people there. I think there have been times when, I think I remember in 2003, St. Mike's played Lovington, and they hadn't won a state title in 31 years at that point. But you had about 5,000, maybe 5,500 people there, and the place was just electric. But in a basketball gym, I mean, some of these places you can only get maybe 1,100, 1,200, 1,500 people. One of my favorite places to go to is Capitol. They have about 1,500 fans. Last week, Capitol and Santa Fe High played each other. Capitol, team that's struggling right now, probably doesn't have a chance of getting to the state, but yet I would say there was about 1,600 people there, and that's a place that holds 1,550. And I hope the fire marshal isn't listening to this, because there probably were some violations committed that night.
So they had an excellent crowd, and perhaps
amazing crowd.
A few people should have been turned away.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I could compare it to was maybe back in 2020 when Capitol and Santa Fe High played each other 6 times, and for the district title at one point they had a playoff game and the district championship game, and you had 5,000 people at a playoff game at Santa Fe Indian School, and I remember that day because I had to write a story about the crowd there, and I forgot my laptop, and so I had to have Chris bring me my laptop, and it took her 30 minutes to get into Indian School to where she could just drop it off and leave, because that's how backed up it was.
That's how backed up the parking was. Wow. And on that note, we will take a quick break and be back for our final segment of Conversations Different.
My name is Maria Jose Rodriguez Cadiz, and I am the Executive Director with Solace Sexual Assault Services. Our mission is to prevent sexual violence and empower survivors of sexual violence through restoring dignity, strength, and resiliency. For almost 51 years, Solace has reduced the impact of sexual violence. We do it by focusing on human rights, social justice, hope, and dignity. We believe survivors are experts in their own experiences and acknowledge that empowering them is crucial to their healing. Our advocacy, forensic interviewing, and therapy services are centered to their needs. Our sexual violence prevention programs in schools and community is just as important. Please check our website at findsolace.org. And if in need, you can call our 24/7 hotline, which is 800-721-7273. Your support is crucial to the lives of survivors. Thank you. Gracias.
We are back again with Conversations Different. So as we're taping, we're a few weeks away or a month away from the start of the state tournament, which I guess is mid-March.
Yes.
And usually we have some teams that are going to go down and perhaps compete, maybe take the title.
Oh, yeah.
How does it look this year for Northern teams?
Well, I think it's going to be a good year. Maybe not necessarily in the same vein that it has been the last couple of years. I think we've kind of grown accustomed to St. Mike's and Robertson playing each other in the boys' side in 3A. Girls' side, it's been Indian School and Robertson a couple of times during that stretch. I still think St. Michael's probably has, out of all the city schools, probably St. Mike's and Academy for Technology and the Classics. Their boys' team is the number one team in Class 2A right now. They lost in the finals last year to Pecos. They've got most of their team back. They're probably the odds-on favorite to win that classification. So I think that's definitely the strongest candidate that we have out there. I'd probably follow that up with St. Mike's, just because they're St. Mike's. They won state last year. They've been there the last 2 years in the finals. Those are probably the two teams that I think have the best shot at least in the city. Now, when you look at the broader perspective up north, I think to me the maybe the most interesting school out there that might have a really good year is Mesa Vista. Both their boys and girls are playing really well. Their boys have won, I think, 13 straight now. They've really gotten hot since the NRG tournament. They're kind of my sleeper pick right now in Class 2A to make a run. Their girls team is ranked number one in the state. They've only lost twice. So you have those two teams there as well. I would also put Las Vegas Robertson, the girls and the boys. The boys, I think, are clearly the best team in 3A right now. So I think they'll probably make it to their third straight final. And that just doesn't sit well, does it?
No. As a Dons fan, that's always painful.
Yeah, unfortunately, as promising as West Las Vegas is, they've got some good, I think they've got some good young players. They might be a year or two away, but it's not going to be quite the same. It's not going to be their year this year,
I do have to say that some of my best friends and little cousins all played for Robertson, so we have split loyalties in our family.
Yeah, but I think those are who you're looking at. I think Santa Fe High, they have a really good team, and depending, especially when you get to 5A, you always kind of have to look at the matchups and everything and see who you're going to play in that first round and in the quarterfinals. But I think for Santa Fe High, if they're on, they can be a really tough team to beat because they've got a lot of good shooters. They've got one of the best players in 5A in guard Lucas Turner, who can really carry that team at times. So they've got the pieces there to make a pretty decent run, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I think 5A is one of those where I think there are 2 or 3 schools I think that are really, really good, and then everybody else is kind of about the same. So you could see some surprises, and I think Santa Fe High might be one of them.
Well, that's what's exciting about the tournament. It's one and done. And if you peak at the right time and have the right opponent that matches your,
That's exactly what happened 5 years or 6 years ago, or 5 years ago. Gosh, I can't believe it's been 5.
Wow.
Santa Fe High, and that's kind of what happened to them. Middle of the year, they caught fire. I believe they won like 10 in a row, including 4 straight in state, until they got to the championship game and lost to Trisco. So, sometimes it's just about, who gets hot at the right time, and we'll have to wait and see here. But I think right about now you're starting to see who's playing well and who has the ability to maybe make one of those runs.
That makes sense. And we haven't talked about the rest of the state as much, but obviously, schools like in Las Cruces, Clovis, Hobbs. I mean, Hobbs was the basketball school of New Mexico for a long, long time.
It was, yes. I'm not sure if that's the case now.
Yeah, that's changed.
I think it has changed. Even in I would say right now, Las Cruces Organ Mountain, formerly Oñate, for those that don't recall the name change, they're probably one of the top teams in 5A. So they're a team to really watch out for. I know there's always kind of this battle between, what are the hotbeds for basketball, for high school basketball fandom. And it used to be, you always talked about Hobbs whenever you talked about that, because their fan base would always come up, especially as you got to the semifinals and the finals of the state basketball tournament. They always routinely showed up and everything. And I think the other thing too is that there was a mystique about the program, and there are a lot of people in Albuquerque and in northern New Mexico that when Hobbs was really good, you came down to watch Hobbs because you wanted to see this team just run and press their way to a state title.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have there been any famous basketball players from New Mexico who went on to other things?
Oh boy, you had to catch me on that one. There have been a lot of really good basketball players that have come out of New Mexico. Gosh, who am I thinking? Why am I drawing a blank? I mean, you think about at least
Kenny Thomas went.
Kenny
to
Thomas,
Albuquerque,
AJ Bramlett.
Yep.
He was a kid from La Cueva that went to
Yep.
that went to Arizona. We could talk about Bryce Alford and Cullen Neal, even though they were kind of transplants because their dads were the coaches at the University of New Mexico, so they came in that way. I'd be remiss not to mention J.B. White here locally at Santa Fe. That's going to be a story of what could have been given his unfortunate death just after he'd graduated high school during COVID. Those are some main figures there that obviously you remember. I remember as a kid, Lovington had a 6'10" kid that went to Duke, Timon Domzalski, and kind of made a name for himself there.
I was in class with Bubba Jennings at Tech.
Oh, that's right. We can't forget about some of the old school people
Yep.
there. Bubba Jennings,
old.
Nelson France, that group there. Yeah.
It's been fun just watching the different players, and I think we couldn't end a talk about basketball though without mentioning the Roybal family just a little bit, because there's the Toby Roybal Gymnasium, and who are they in kind of the basketball firmament?
Lexicon, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Toby Roybal was, he's probably, actually, when you think about it, he's probably maybe the first really named New Mexico, I guess I would say athlete to a degree, that really made his name beyond our borders there. He was a great player for Santa Fe High, went and played at the University of New Mexico. He got an opportunity to play, I believe it was with the New York Knicks. He got a cup of coffee with them for a little while. Before he came back and started teaching here, and then unfortunately he passed away at an early age from cancer, and that's in part why the gym is named after him. But his brother, Lenny Roybal, kind of followed in his footsteps later, became the coach at Santa Fe High back in the mid to late 70s and early 80s, and he led the Demons to their only state title, as a matter of fact, back in 1978, which I think when you talk about the great teams of Santa Fe, I think you talk about the Mighty Midgets, obviously. That's probably the first team that really comes to mind. But then you follow that closely with the 78 team from Santa Fe High. And then after that, I think everybody else is kind of, in this large pool of, hey, we're good too, but you don't quite get to that level because of just the legendary status that those two teams have taken.
Yeah. I mean, even I knew about him, and we had moved to Texas by that point, but my cousin Henry always kept me posted, and he was a senior in 78. So that was, a big deal, just knowing that somebody from the North was going to take the title, even if it wasn't the Dons.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think it was about a month and a half ago, we just had another one of the members of that 78 team pass away, and Ronnie Rodriguez, whose family is well known in northern New Mexico. His dad was Bobby Rodriguez, who coached at St. Mike's, Santa Fe High, amongst other places. His brother, David Rodriguez, coached at Santa Fe High and St. Mike's. He's got another brother, Ernie, who coached at several different schools, Indian School, West Las Vegas, Desert Academy. So they've got a really big basketball presence here, and he passed away, unfortunately, on Christmas Eve, but he was a big part of that team in 78. And then also, interestingly, he ended up playing at the College of Santa Fe when Lenny Roybal moved over there and guided that program to, I believe, the Elite Eight in the NAIA championships in 1983. Ronnie was in the team the year before, but they were kind of the precursor to that team that went on to that if you ask a lot of people, they probably should have won the national title that year with that group.
Wow. That's what could have been again.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of basketball is you think about that ball that went out of bounds and how Virginia ended up national champions instead of my Red Raiders. But on that note, this has been another Conversation Different, and we thank you, and we wish luck to all the teams going to the state tournament.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
You're welcome.